Um, you did change my mind on that one. So congratulations on
Hey,
that.
we're blue pilling
Um,
everybody.
you got me on that one.
I want to talk with you about a number of subjects that directly affect the future of the United States.
My name is Devin Moore. Friends just call me Moore. I'm here with one of my good friends, Jace. Although I don't know if he would call me the same, I do consider him very highly. How you doing, Jace?
Ah, doing good. Ciao.
That's great to hear. We have a lot more people than when I first did this, so you might actually get more folks to listen than just the guys we work with. How do you feel about that?
I feel good about it.
You feel
Feel good
good?
about it.
Ah,
Get some of the political prowess out there.
it's going to be fantastic. So, Jace, just because I like to always make sure we know our audience, go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about yourself. Not too much. Don't dox yourself or anything. Just like where you're from originally and a little bit of your political leaning.
All right. So I am from small town in Missouri, middle of nowhere. Uh, I consider myself moderate, conservative, heavy values. Uh, pretty center, pretty center, a little bit to the right. There's some things that I care about, a lot of things I don't. Uh, you know, you're average American.
You're a good old boy, I'd say. You know.
I sure.
All right. So for clarity's sake, you have not watched any of my videos yet, but you know, as you would say, how would you describe my politics from our conversations at work?
Left side of the political spectrum for sure.
Yeah, awfully left. How?
Not crazy left. Not the people that are screaming in your face with pink and blue hair and calling you a fascist if you like cops. You know.
Yeah. Well, I won't talk about our work, but it'd be kind of hard to be that kind of left with our general line of work most times.
Maybe.
And have I, so based on our conversations, because again, the whole thesis of my channel is to really focus on the aspect of since 2016, especially, we have gotten away from at least decent conversations with other human beings. So, based on our conversations, you don't think that I've ever like considered you racist or right of center to an obnoxious degree? You know, I've just treated you like a normal, regular person, right?
Well, maybe whenever we first started talking, but no, I don't think so.
Okay,
I think we've always been pretty cordial,
very
pretty
cordial, very cordial.
pretty easy to get along with and whatnot.
Now, based on our conversations, do you have I moved the needle with you at all? Because I know you said during this it would be a little more of kind of like informational, me talking a bit, because you consider yourself ignorant towards politics on the most part.
I've learned a lot. Learned a lot. Like I told you the other day, there's not. I'm pretty set in my ways on how I view things. Pretty neutral on things. But I have definitely learned a lot. You've taught me a lot about the political sphere of what's going on currently and historically, and with the previous administration and what's going to be expected in the current administration and past administrations with Obama and Bush and
Yeah,
Clinton and everything like that.
yeah, uh, it's interesting. Would you so everybody knows you did not vote this last election, correct?
I did not know.
Okay, but you did vote back in 2016, right?
I sure did.
And who did you vote for?
Oh, I think we can both take a guess. I voted for old
Donnie,
Donald Trumpy,
old Donnie J. And did you vote? I don't.
the Don.
Oh, God, I hate. Uh, and did you vote in the 2020 election or no?
I did not
You did
know.
not.
I've
Now,
been so busy with my job. It's too much of a hassle. At this last election, it wasn't a hassle. I was actually, kind of the starting point for everybody that did want to vote within our job where I was at. And but this last election, it was kind of out of principle. I
you didn't want to
didn't really
participate.
wasn't really on the side of either candidate.
So then, I'm curious because obviously in 2016 you were much younger than you are now. So what over the last 8 years or so made you kind of go away from wanting to vote for old Donnie J again?
Just getting older, maturing, seeing the actions of people not only on the right but also on the left, the vehement opposition to Donald Trump and the emotional support that was given to him, and how far both sides have slid into craziness.
Right.
You know, a lot of people view him as a god, and a lot of people also view him as the devil. You know, and it's not. I don't agree with either one of those things. Everybody's just a person in my book.
Yeah, he's just a regular run of the mill son of a gun. Just one of the ones that are a bit more vulgar than most. So, was there any one particular incident that maybe pushed you a little bit farther away from him or not? Or was it just the general culmination of everything?
I would say it's the generality of just everything that happened. Um, it's hard to describe. As I've gotten older, a little older now than what I was in 2016. 2016, I was 18 years old, fresh into the voting stock and ready to go. And
Yeah.
now I'm a little older and I see how things are and how things are working out, and it's kind of disheartening.
Yeah. There was something you told me a couple weeks ago where you said that when you were 18, if we had engaged in a conversation like this, you'd have been a lot more like, "Hey, shut the hell up! You're all dumb and stupid." Do you feel like you regret that kind of time in your life, or do you think like we should get? Is that where a lot of kids are nowadays?
Yeah, I do. I do, in a way, regret the actions and the word choices that I would have used back in the day. Looking at liberal politics and people who align with that side and being like, oh, they're all crazy and they hate men, they hate white people, blah blah blah. Whenever I don't necessarily think that's true now. There is a segment that do,
Yeah.
just like there's a segment of the right that hate black people and hate women and whatnot. But I do kind of regret being as emotionally involved as I was.
Yeah. And I think like having done the same thing, just kind of the opposite end of the politics, I was definitely much more emotional about certain things when I was 18. Like I wasn't as well spoken as I am now.
Yeah,
I, it's one of those things that you only get with maturity. Like we were just talking today, the second you turn 25, you really do realize how over invested you were in certain things at a younger age.
yeah.
And that's you see, especially this last
Well,
election, a lot of the young people went for Trump.
some people never grow up too. You'll see 45-year-olds out here acting crazy, both sides of the spectrum.
That's very true. That is very true. So based on everything that's happened, because when we were first having these conversations when you got back, Trump wasn't the president yet. Based on everything that's happened so far, how are you feeling politically about everything?
Mm, good question.
I am filled with those.
Uh, uh, you know, I am happier that, you know, let's just say this. I'm happy that um Trump ended up beating out Harris. I would have taken anybody else besides those two.
Yeah,
But it's I was happier. Not I wouldn't say happier, relieved, I guess, whenever I woke up in the morning and saw that Trump had won. Um, but there is some doubt for the future, of within the next 4 years. I know it's going to be crazy. I know the next 4 years are going to be a ride, kind of like the last 4 years were, and we're gonna just have to buckle in and grit our teeth and see what happens. But I don't know, man. I don't know.
it's definitely a big unknown, and that's what I've always tried to like reiterate. Because when I first started paying attention to politics, it was during Obama. My dad sat me down because he's pretty lefter than center, and he made us watch Obama's first inauguration, and we got to like right before we went to school, we got to see that. He's like, "This is a very historical moment. You need to pay attention to this."
Mhm.
And pretty much ever since that, I started to like tune into the news a little bit more, and just seeing the same patterns over and over again. Because like I know I lean hard left on certain things, but I didn't get that by watching left wing politics or the news or anything. I just got that by watching what the Republican Party was doing for the most part. And
Sure.
seeing what happened in history and being like, none of this makes sense. Like this, the tariffs, for example, prime comparison is if you looked at the 1930s, and I know I've talked to you about this before, but tariffs used in the 1930s during the Great Depression did not help the country. They in fact made the depression worse because industries weren't able to better recuperate from the lost revenue in the United States or even around the world. But one of the big talking points that Trump has pointed out this election is that tariffs are going to be our savior for some godforsaken reason, and not the massive increase in prices that they are going to be in reality. And
Yeah.
so that is what radicalized me to go left of center. It had nothing to do with Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris or even Donald Trump to an extent, because I voted Clinton for the politics, not because I liked her, but it was mostly if it had been anybody other than Clinton and Trump, like I'd have voted for Romney in 2016, just for
Sure.
just for the perceived actions that Clinton was a bit more corrupt than I would have liked on certain things.
I would have liked to see Ben Carson.
Oh God, Ben Carson, really? What did you like
Yeah.
about Ben Carson?
I thought he was extremely educated, extremely well spoken. He was very down to earth, it seemed like. He was probably a brain surgeon. Um, I thought he was very, very intelligent. You need a little bit of intelligence to be able to run the country, right?
You should. You would think that. I actually had the opposite opinion of Ben Carson. That's kind of funny.
You thought he was a blowhard?
I did. I didn't see him. It's one of those things where I try not to get too much of opinion on some people. But Ben Carson was one of those where, based on comments he said, I just like you're speaking out of your ass because like he's a brain surgeon, right? So he's very
Sure.
good. Hopefully, you would think he's very good at brain surgery. But a brain surgeon does not an economist make. Is not a cardiologist make.
Yeah, that's true.
And he got put in charge of the housing and urban development under Trump. And I did not remember that off the top of my head. I did look that up just now. But the thing he said during Obama's first and second term was that made me kind of like look at him with a double guess was that socialized healthcare was the linchpin for all communism. And I was listening to that. I'm like, that seems weird. And he did not die. I think it was the other African American in Trump's cabinet that died of COVID. But he kind of didn't do anything after becoming the Housing and Urban Development Secretary and just faded into nothingness on politics. But on that, one of the things I wanted to bring up is you told me the other week is that obviously you don't like Trump too much, but one of the people you said you would prefer over Trump was Barack Obama. And I'm curious as to if you could explain to us why you think that.
Well, as I was telling you earlier on, he was more decisive.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't like outright threaten people, like how Trump does. Like, you remember the whole interview where he was like, this terrorist was messing with us, and I sent him a picture of his house
Yeah.
and said I'm gonna drop a bomb directly on there.
Yeah, I don't.
Well,
I've heard that story.
he Obama didn't say like, hey, I'm gonna drop a bomb. He just dropped them,
Yeah.
Also, he was very strict with the borders. And I know they've sent what 1,800 troops down to the border.
Yeah. Something about
Whenever
that.
they declared the cartel as a terrorist organization. And he was very well spoken. I think being very well spoken is a pretty important part of holding public office because you got to be able to convey your points. You got to be able to convey what you're trying to get across the board to people. And the easier that you make it to understand people, or the easier it is for you to be understood by people, the more success you're going to have,
Right.
whenever it comes to public office. Because people, like yourself and I, we're inherently dumb. You release a bill that's 1,200 pages long, we're not going to read it. We're going to hear the main talking points from the talking heads on the TV, and we're going to make our decisions based on that. And within those bills, there's tiny little subsections that, the big point of this bill may be, banning uh, transgender people in the military, but a subsection within the bill is you're going to take away money from military housing and divert it to border security.
I'm glad
You
you brought
know,
that up because that's something we could talk about here in a minute.
um, but Obama was very well spoken, is very charismatic. Um, he wasn't as didn't seem to me at the time as far left as what he could have gone. It seemed like he kind of stayed more toward the center left. You know, he made gay marriage illegal. You know, whatnot. That was in what 2014,
14, I believe.
15.
That was technically the Supreme Court. Obama didn't really have much to do with it, although he did
He
help push.
started it.
Yeah, he's
Started it.
yeah,
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 you know, he's accredited with it, right?
yeah.
Which I think is cool because you know, love who you want to love. I don't really care. Um, I just prefer him.
That's
You
fair.
know,
It's just the vibes,
and a
really.
lot of people wouldn't. A lot of people wouldn't agree with me, but personally, that's my viewpoint. You know.
Yeah. So my personal theory on that is when you told me that I do think that if you took say Joe Biden or Kamala Harris out of context and out of the context of like our current media environment, I think you would like them a bit more in the same way that you liked Obama. It's like you said, like we don't read the whole fucking bill. We see bits and pieces of like our political talking heads, and then we
Yeah.
kind of base our opinion on that. And that narrative by itself has a lot to do with it. Like you brought up the whole cutting military housing. Did you know, like during Trump's first term, one of the things he did was because he could not get funding for the border or the border wall he wanted to do, he took money from Balfour Beatty and other military housing projects and diverted it directly to the border wall. And we were,
Yes. Yeah. You had mentioned that earlier on, and yeah,
yeah,
yeah. That's a little rough. You know, and you're seeing the fallout from stuff like that because you look at Marine bases and their dormitories or their barracks
mm-hmm,
are full of mold. You
yep,
know, Air Force bases are starting to suffer from the same thing too. Army bases, naval bases, you know, they're kind of in the same boat as Marine bases where they're close to the sea. They're getting a lot of moist wind and moist air, and it just leads to mold growth, and you have to take an active step in preventing mold. And but if you don't have the funds to do it, you can't really do it, and the service member suffers because of that. You
yeah.
know?
And that's because I know there's always a back and forth of like which party supports the service members more. I see where both sides screw up a little bit, but when it came to like that especially, it really ticked me off that more people in the military weren't aware of that problem because it's one of those things that is not going to get reported on by like Fox News or any
No.
conservative media commentator, but all of the long-term effects because like you don't clean the mold or you don't support the funding for housing for like 1 year or the military development housing for 1 year. Okay, do it for 2 years, you won't notice too much, but after 3, 4, 5 years it starts to build up. And so a lot of
Starts
those
to compound.
yeah, a lot of those problems that started under Trump became compacted under Biden. And I think a lot of people, and granted, this is completely anecdotal on certain things, but I think a lot of people would like blame that on Biden because of those problems. That they're like, oh, okay, my housing sucks. Fox News tells me that Biden has cut funding for the military, and so I directly correlate those two. And that's what I've been really kind of adamant on, like breaking. Like right now,
Well,
probably
it's hard. It's hard not to think that way, man.
it
You know,
is.
you get told these things by a trusted media source. You know, is any form of media truly trusted? No,
No, it's not trusted.
no, not really. But it's hard as your average person. It's hard not to think like, oh, this candidate or that candidate is causing this problem for me because as humans, we want to put blame on something,
Yeah.
you know. And the service member too can also keep up with their own room. They're
Yes.
supposed to,
Yeah, we have
but they
both.
don't.
Yeah, we've
You're
seen
asking 18-year-old kids to stay on top of cleaning.
hard.
Probably not going to happen very often.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where like you see recently, like the junior enlisted get a pay increase here. come soon, right? And it's a
Sure.
very large
Yeah.
pay increase. One of the
It's great.
things
Yeah.
one things that I know for a fact will happen is because this pay increase was approved under Biden and the Democrats in control of the Senate. Um,
But it takes effect under
Under
Trump, and
Trump,
everybody's going to
everybody's
say,
going to
"Oh,
say,
Trump did
"Oh,
this,"
yeah,
you know?
exactly."
Yeah.
I'm not going to give Biden too much credit on it because I haven't read what his actual actions were for preparing that pay increase. But at the same time, it had to be approved by the Democrats in the Senate, so they agreed to it, even if they weren't the ones originally fighting for it. But Trump will get
Sure.
all the credit. I guarantee it. And you see,
Yeah.
on this one, it's relatively minor because this only affects a certain group of people that are pretty much fairly pro-conservative, I would say, on the majority.
Yeah.
But if you look at bigger picture things, like I know we've talked about the tax bill a lot, and that's something that I've criticized a lot of people for not properly understanding. Like that is one of the big ones where it's because you're completely right. Most people aren't going to pay attention or see or hear or understand things because it's like what media is trusted. But to me, having watched all of this for the past few years, it's very easy to see what certain factions in the media and the political space have made that intentional because they want people to tune out, right? So, like you and I are slightly opposed on certain political issues, but my argument has always been is that for actual policy, most people would agree on things. Um, it's just that we have been lied to on what the actual side is, and even if we aren't believing those lies, we're getting so exhausted with the narrative put out. Like, look at what Trump's doing right now, where he's just putting out executive order after executive order. It's just to exhaust everybody. And if you can tune out, then he can go do whatever the hell he wants because you won't be opposed because you're not even paying attention, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing like I don't know if you haven't studied or looked at the Russian propaganda stuff, have you?
No, but Russian propaganda has been around for years,
Yeah.
years, and it's kind of the same way as North Korea,
Mm-hmm.
where they say, our leader, our great and mighty leader, uh, is perfect in every way. He doesn't even defecate. And in Russia, they've said, oh, our economy is being bolstered by this war. Our economy is stronger than it's ever been. But if you look at the rupee, it has historically the least amount of buying power that it's ever had since the fall of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
You know,
And on that, I would say a lot of the things that Trump did during his first term, like you look at the big things, and Trump was like, "Oh, best economy in the world, biggest tax break you've ever going to get," and it wasn't. It was a tax break for the rich, and lower middle class got like more taxed afterwards
yeah,
because of the way the bill was set up. It's a lot of those same things where they just will say whatever they want, and not on both sides of this as well, because the Democrats and Joe Biden are hilariously bad at saying how their big economic successes are going to affect the average person, right? Like, name me something you think Trump did good during his first term, because I guarantee you could probably think of something, right?
uh, I think it was good, and a lot of people I think would disagree with me on this. I think it was good that he actually got to meet Kim Jong Un in person.
Yes.
He bridged that gap of this isolationist country of North Korea, saying where they were saying we don't want to talk to anybody. We know we're the best, whatnot. Nobody else is coming in. But Trump, waltzed in there and said, "Hey, we're having a conversation, man." And I thought that was good. I thought that was really good because he showed Kim Jong Un like, "Hey, you're just a little dude. You're not gonna tell us what's going on. We're gonna tell you what's up."
So that's actually a prime example I'm talking about. So when do you remember which year he met with Kim Jong Un?
Off the top of my head, no.
So if I want to say it was definitely before 2020. I want to say it was 2018 and 2019. Let me look it up because I don't want to put out false information like I did the other day. When did Trump meet Kim Jong Un? It was 2018. I'm go good at this. So he met Kim Jong Un in 2018, and there was some positivity from that. I think media on both sides, left and right, reflected positively of him on that. He met him in 2018 and looks like partially 2019. But I always ask people because I've had a lot of conservatives, especially in our work environment, who will respond with that exactly. And I ask them, What happened after he met with Kim Jong-un? Because he made a very big public spiel about it. He talked all about how successful this meeting was, and you saw the media ate it up over him. But what meaningful impact came after that meeting? Do you know by chance? Can you tell me? I'm curious because no one's been able to answer that question for me.
No,
No.
I'm your average person. You're gonna
Yeah.
have to tell me, man.
Average person, jack fucking shit. Nothing came of that. Uh,
Nothing came from it.
the 2020, we got all distracted with the protests and COVID, but North
COVID.
Korea went exactly back to its original thing, and all Trump did was get a really good press brief. That when North Korea started to like act up in the news again, suddenly it looked like, well, weren't we just friends with them under Trump 2-3 years ago? What the hell happened, Joe Biden? What were you doing,
I don't think
Joe?
we've ever been. I don't think we've ever been friends with
No.
North Korea.
But you get
You
like
know?
the whole propaganda thing was, well, Trump just met them, so I don't understand how the
Yeah.
it escalated so. And at the same time, I got to be careful. I almost doxed us. So when you looked at what Trump gave North Korea in return for like that whole meeting, a lot of it was just kind of like placating them. Like he canceled military exercises randomly on the Korean Peninsula to just let North Korea make them happy. And it ultimately did absolutely nothing. By the end of his administration, we were just as hostile with them as we were at the start, but it made a really good photo op, and everyone could like, look how peaceful Trump tried to make things. I feel, and I have no way to back this up actually, but I feel like a good statesman, anybody like Barack Obama, had actually had a chance to do that because I don't give Trump too much credit for meeting them originally. It was kind of just a timing of what the North Koreans were doing at the same time. Anybody else might have actually been able to make headway with that. Trump just called him Rocket Man and said he wrote me a nice letter. I don't know what happened. And that's the kind of the news cycle that I keep getting back at is people will come back with this quick quip or talking point and say, well, Trump met with North Korea and now, or Trump was friends with Russia, or we didn't have war with Russia, but now Russia's at war with Ukraine and Joe Biden's directly at fault for that. And I'm like, you're ignoring the entire history of it.
It's funny that you bring up the war in Ukraine and North Korea. Have you seen, and I'm sure that you have because you're very up to speed on things, you've seen that, North Korea has sent like 6,000 troops over
Oh yeah.
to Russia and they are getting slaughtered.
Yep.
If I was a North Korean service member right now, I'd be terrified
Yeah.
because there's no support for them. And I watched a video the other day, and it could be a biased video, or I could just be wrong. But Russia has been, not claiming these deaths, saying that they're not dying. They're burning North Korean bodies that are dying over there, saying, "Oh, we didn't. They're not dying. They're doing good," But you see these drone videos of North Korean soldiers getting killed every day.
No, you're exactly right, and that's been Russia's MO for the last 10 years. No, 11 years since 2014 when they started this conflict in Ukraine. Russia will continuously just lie about everything, and even lies that like don't make sense. And this is part of because Tulsi Gabbard, we'll get to her too. Part of their misinformation campaign, because like they'll just burn the bodies, but they'll also, if somebody dies in Ukraine, they'll just claim that they are missing in action. Like they have proof the person died, but they won't give the family members back in the Russia any kind of compensation, because if they ran away from combat, well then they aren't deserving of compensation according to Russian law. And they do this about everything, and they do it in such a way that it's impossible to keep up with the misinformation, because the war started for 8 different reasons. It started because of NATO expansion. It started because Ukraine was going too far to the west. It started because the U.S. had overthrown the Ukrainian government, that Zelensky was a Nazi, and then like 6 months into the full-scale invasion, suddenly they're talking about bioweapons by the United States government being developed in Ukraine. Have you heard about the bioweapon thing at all?
Nope. Yeah,
Nope.
tell me about it.
Okay, so
Educational experience.
yeah, so this is why I don't like Tulsi Gabbard, because Tulsi Gabbard also helped promote this theory about the bioweapons in Ukraine. What had happened was that the United States government, and I believe organizations like the CDC, had laboratories in Ukraine, as they had many other countries around the world, to help study diseases and the spread of not necessarily bioweapons, but anything biological of that nature, like Ebola or COVID-19, right? And
Yeah.
Ukraine was, as a member of a former Soviet republic, was subject to some of this that had been stretching back years and decades, including Poland, Estonia, some of the other countries as well. I'm doing this all off the top of my head, so I might get some of the specifics wrong.
You're
But
fine, brother.
what happened is somebody heard CDC Ukraine biology or bio and immediately added weapon to that. And what Russia did was they promoted that narrative like crazy to basically say Ukraine is developing super soldier bioweapons. That's the reason we're not winning in this war, is because they have been developing these bioweapons with the United States. And that narrative took off so goddamn quickly. And you saw it reflected in a lot of how, like, because I'm sure you heard some of the conspiracies about COVID being a bioweapon designed to kill. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same idea. It's the same kind of methodology of just pushing this crazy conspiracy that promotes a previous conspiracy. And even though, like, in the past 3 years, nobody's talked about it, it was such a big presence online that Tulsi Gabbard, and this is one of the many reasons she was considered a Russian asset, was promoting this online and promoting this idea and theory, saying the United States asked for this. We were building bioweapons in Ukraine, and that's why Russia had to attack. Even though Russia never mentioned that until after their full-scale invasion, and even then, it was complete bullshit to begin with, because it's impossible to engage in an actual conversation with somebody when they're just making shit up to push a narrative of, like, we just want their land, resources, and people. Don't matter why.
Yeah.
And that's, if you look how especially the Republican Party has operated since, I'd argue, 2008 when Obama got elected, you can see a lot of the same patterns. And I'm sure, like, you heard the whole Russiagate tying Trump to different Russian misinformation stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is your opinion before we talk about what's your opinion on that whole conspiracy then?
On Russian Gate?
Yeah.
Uh, it'd be impossible to prove, you know, because, people are so technologically savvy right now that if they wanted to cover their tracks, they could. You know, you see all the time how good people are with computers, how good people are with technology right now,
Mm-hmm.
that it's you can make it impossible to get caught. Let's say election tampering from
Mm-hmm.
2020, right? That was the big, Donald Trump actually won the election, but the votes were tampered with because Nancy Pelosi's husband owns the voting machine manufacturers, right?
Yeah.
One, I think we should go back to paper ballots, for everything,
Yeah.
because it's hard to tamper with those.
It is. Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think that, I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire, right? You know, people don't just, some people do, but most people don't just make shit up just to do it, you know?
I disagree with that. So on the whole, like, 2020 thing, to pull it all together, I think I am not a cybersecurity expert, right?
Neither am I, brother.
But the thing that I've noticed is that a lot of people think that it's a lot easier to get away with things, especially in computers, than it actually is, right? So one of the things, because I know a lot of people on the left have tried to get the whole, 2024 was actually stolen. Elon Musk bought these different election services in Pennsylvania and managed to steal the election for Trump, right? And I've had this.
I've heard less about that than what I did in 2020.
You know why? Do you know why you've heard less about that? It's
Because of the echo chamber I'm in, huh?
No, not because the echo chamber. It's because Donald Trump was the one pushing those conversations in 2020. Kamala Harris conceded. There was no actual evidence for it. But when there was no evidence in 2020, Donald Trump did not care. And he just ran with it. And we could talk on more of that later, because I studied a lot on that whole election. But there are aspects of it you can hear on the left of them repeating the same conspiracies that the right said in 2020. Not nearly as bad, not nearly as prevalent, and many people in like left social media groups are talking against it. But one of the things that I keep like reiterating to them is that if you look how the elections are run in the United States, it is not easy to hack an election. Because first of all, many of the machines are not connected to the internet. Donald Trump lied and tried to say that they were, and they get software updates from the internet when they need it, but are not connected 24/7. So like I can't live go in there and change all the election machines.
Yeah.
Uh, Two is that they are all run on different systems at the state and often county level. So if I hack one county in Florida, I'm going to have to go and hack a different county in Pennsylvania or New York to provide the same effect. It
Yeah.
is to do that on such a scale. Like one of the reasons that I think it's good that our elections aren't centralized is because we avoid that. But you also look at countries that do actually have election interference, or I would say non-free elections like Russia. You can see what they're doing because people will show the stuff come out where you actually have like in Russia they'll have people like they'll count the ballots but there's nothing on the ballot. Like this is they'll have the news source like this is a live recording of the Russian ballots being counted for like the new president, and it's just completely blank ballots that they're flipping over because they have a fake election. They don't even fucking hide it anymore. Like Putin won by like 80%, 88%, which I don't care what dictatorship you are, no one's winning by 88% in any country. Whereas in the United States, you can see all of the different things, and they'll say the same thing that I just said about Russia, right? Rudy Giuliani, you know Rudy Giuliani, right?
Hmm.
Rudy Giuliani went out and said, this woman is carrying in a box of ballots and will only show a 30-second clip from like a live recording of a counting office. And everyone's like, oh my God, that's a whole ballot being brought in from we don't know where. But then they'll go back and they'll look at the entire live recording. She literally brought it from like one part of the building to another. And they're selectively editing and providing that as evidence. Now, the reason that in 2020, and this is, again, I keep reiterating this, none of the actual interference was real was because every time Rudy Giuliani or any Trump lawyer went to court, they literally said, we don't have any evidence of election interference. We have none. And every single one of their court cases was thrown out. But they would go on Fox News, they would go on Newsmax, they would talk on their Twitter or whatever, and they would say, the election is being stolen from you. You are having this election stolen from you. And the thing that infuriates the hell out of me, because yeah, they're going to do that, but the thing that infuriates the hell out of me is they would rather pretend that half of America is either dead or doesn't exist, and zombies voted for Joe Biden, than acknowledge the vast majority of people who don't like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
kind of like is the reason that I'll hate the crazy leftists that we talked about earlier, right? But it's why I'll never get behind the general conservative narrative, or at least the Republican narrative, I should say, is like, I'm a regular dude. I voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I ain't got nothing to regret so far about those votes. But they really don't think I exist. Like, in all honesty.
You know, I kind of want to get into this
Go ahead.
little side topic of this two-party system.
Oh, yes.
I hate it.
Me
I
too.
hate it because there's no regulation for either side. Yeah, if you throw in a third party, you take Theodore Roosevelt, right, with the Bull Moose Party. He came in and basically for 8 years put a stop to the two-party system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but since then, a third party has never been able to gain traction because everybody's so convinced that it has to be a Republican or it has to be a Democrat in office. Why does it have to be one or the other? Why can't we get a third party in there? A third party never gains any traction, and I would love to see a third party gain some traction because it gives you another option, you know?
It does. I think because I've had a lot of part of the fun thing that I've experienced is having to convince conservatives, like the folks we work with, that I'm not a crazy libtard. But on the other side, convincing, I don't want to say crazy libtards, but some of the more far left folks that just don't want to vote because of the same reason, right? That you don't want to vote,
Yeah.
like the two party system sucks. having to convince them like, no, y'all need to vote. Y'all need to vote. Because I don't like the two-party system either. Nobody likes the two-party system. It is a natural result and cause of how our elections are run, right?
And I know you'll have something to say about this too, but I would have this last election. I would have voted if there was an actual legitimate chance that a third party could have won. Because everybody
Yeah,
says, "Oh, voting for the third party is a waste of a vote,"
yeah.
right? And I hate that.
Oh, I do too. I believe me, I hate that is the argument because I understand the desire to vote for what you actually want rather than simply voting against something. And it's why I've been very careful whenever I vote for anybody to explain the positives. Like I can explain the positives of Kamala Harris as best I can, but it's irrelevant now. Um, I think it's used as a how do I explain? I don't think our choices are wholly binary though, right?
No.
Because Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat, but he's one of the most popular politicians in America because when he ran for election, he did it under the Democratic Party because he knew if he ever went third party, it would just split the ticket.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, the best option we have, and it's still the reason that I support the Democratic Party overall. I'm using the support very loosely, is because
I'm gonna sorry. I'm gonna go out on a branch here,
go ahead.
out on a limb. If a third party had a legitimate chance this last election and was like deep into it, Kamala Harris would have won. She would have won this election because
Oh
it would have split the Republican vote big time because there's a ton of Republicans that did not want to vote for Donald Trump,
yeah,
but they absolutely did not want to vote for
Kamala
Kamala
Harris. Yeah.
Harris.
I kind of agree with you, and that's why RFK dropped out of the race and joined Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Like that because he was pulling more and more people away from Trump and going towards him,
Mm-hmm.
which they were afraid was going to cause Kamala Harris to win. And RFK is just another damn grifter. But anyway, the issue is to explain to people like if you want another person, like not a corporate Democrat or not a MAGA Republican, go and vote in the primaries because our system is not wholly binary. You have to, and I'm going to make a video on this eventually when I start to attack more left wing figures, is you've got to vote because it's the only way we're going to have any effective change, period, in any form of government. It's not going to, because you don't subscribe to the idea, because I know a couple of conservatives I've talked to are just tired of the entire system and just want it to go away. Are you in favor of that, or are you in favor of like, what's your opinion on that?
It needs an overhaul.
Needs an overhaul? How would
It's need to bring in younger people, for sure. Because, you know, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. The older generation, obviously they have experience, they know what's going on, they've been in politics for years, they've been through multiple elections, they know what's going on, right?
yeah.
Um, but they're not in touch with people that are your and I's age. Like I'm 27. They're not in touch with a kid who just graduated college and is 22 years old. Even your conservatives that just graduated college, these older people think all conservatives don't like gay people. They all think, marijuana should still be illegal. But I would say your typical conservative that just graduated college at 22 years old doesn't give a shit if you're gay, doesn't care if you want to smoke weed, doesn't care if you want to, it doesn't care who you love or what you do, basically.
Yeah.
They just want to keep their guns. They just think that we should, that, you know, hot topic.
Uh,
They don't think that transgenderism isn't like
we're
a mental
gonna.
dysfunction, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I I would say they're more the average conservative is more towards the center than what they ever have been in the past.
I agree full heartedly. Like especially after
And I
talking
would,
with you.
the political spectrum has shifted throughout the years, right? It's gone from over here, your conservatives are over here. It's gone this way. to where your typical left person in it 30 years ago would have been considered center. Now,
Yep.
now your typical, liberal left person is more to the left, and your typical conservative is more considered center now.
Yep.
And I don't think this older generation realizes. That's why we need to bring in younger generations because they realize that, you know?
I I fully agree where that is, and again, like that's my entire theory is that like you and I are going to agree on a lot more, especially when we break down the policies, than we ever will in previous generations. The problem is that older generation or not, we have completely lost the fucking plot. And my opinion is that the conservatives have leaned heavily into the arguments of, like, okay, you may not like gays and marijuana, or you may like the gays and marijuana, but Kamala Harris is going to take your guns. So, which would you rather give up? And for your average like college conservative male or like the younger conservative fellas, they're like, well, like I don't give a shit about those gays too much, but I want to keep my guns.
Yeah,
They will just believe that hook, line, and sinker, even though
sure.
like Obama, like they said that for 8 years under Obama, right? Like my stepfather would not shut up about how Obama was a Muslim born in Kenya about to take everybody's fucking gun. But if you look at the policies, Obama passed more or signed more pro-gun executive orders than George Bush ever did before him. And that's like that cognitive dissonance of them just listening to the conservative talking points without ever actually addressing the substance is what pushed me to the Democratic Party. Is that the substance at the very freaking least, like they did something. Kamala Harris was a gun owner. Like you knew she was a gun owner, right?
She says she was.
Well, she said she was. She said she had a registered firearm. I personally believe she shot a gun more than Donald Trump ever did because he's a fucking New York Yank, but that's just me. I know Joe Biden had a notoriously stupid gaffes about guns, but her vice presidential pick, Tim Walz, like he was a gun owner. Like he was a staunchly, I don't want to say staunchly, but he had a lot of backgrounds in firearms, including like a lot of campaign promos that they put out of like him going duck hunting and things like that. But Tim Walz was still considered too far left for the average conservative because I don't know what. Like every time they came up with an argument, I sat there and I'm like, none of that makes sense.
Did you watch the vice presidential debate?
I did, yes, I did watch most of that. It's
I watched it too, and watching watching how one candidate or one vice presidential candidate versus the other
mhm.
communicated to the camera or to the audience was very interesting to me.
Yeah, Tim Walz is
Um,
notoriously bad at that apparently. So
Tim Walz was, I could be wrong, but what it seemed like to me, because perception is reality, right?
yeah,
It seemed like to me he was begging, and if you are a pretty like man's man, I would consider myself, I don't. It's hard to describe. I don't respond well to begging.
yeah.
You know what I mean. I didn't feel like I could connect with him versus
JD Vance.
JD Vance. I didn't feel like I could connect with him very well. JD Vance, communicated his points very clearly and directly to the camera and said more authoritative
Mm-hmm.
versus Tim Walz, who seemed like he was begging.
Yeah.
Also, a little side
Now
note.
go ahead.
I know JD Vance was looking at the camera whenever he was, or looking at the monitor or whatnot whenever he was talking, but he'd like look over and he'd be like, I'm waiting for the memes for this. I'm waiting for
There
the
weren't that
the
many
memes to come out from
memes.
that.
There weren't that many
No, there
memes from
weren't.
that.
I saw a couple, but not very many.
No, I don't. 'Cause I don't
Uh,
think JD Vance is
it's a
that
vice
memeable.
presidential debate,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, that's not because during the 2020 and maybe 2016, Mike Pence got memed a lot from the VP debate because there was that whole fly landing on his head.
Mm,
But I mean, that's like a meme you can't control. Like that stuff's going to come up
no,
organically.
yeah, yeah.
I think I think that does speak a lot on it, and it's one of those things where perception is everything. Its substance means nothing nowadays. Like when I watch oh, go ahead.
I will say, I will say, the vice presidential debate was 100 times more watchable than the presidential debate.
Yeah,
I told the people that I was with at that point, I said, I'd rather these two be running for president than the two that are now.
yeah.
This is 10 times as civil, 10 times as easy to watch, 10 times as easy to understand as the presidential debate whenever I was watching the presidential debate.
Well, I have because I want to on the VP debate because I agree with you. It's much more civil, but it does. What did you think? Who is to blame? Because we've talked about this before. Who do you think it is to blame that has ruined that civility in politics that has kind of driven you away from participating like normal?
Us as the American people.
Us, the American people. You don't blame any particular figures for it.
It's hard to watch. It's hard to watch a Donald Trump debate.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It is.
As the candidate that I preferred to win,
Yeah.
it's hard to watch him debate because he just gets out there and shit talks.
Yeah.
You know,
It should.
doesn't come super prepared, just wings it.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to watch, and not very civil. Uh, but I will say at the end of the day, I think the responsibility falls on us as American voters, as American people, to hold these candidates to a certain level of acting, to a certain level of civility.
So
Yet we have failed to do that, resulting to where we're at now.
So on that, do you think it is the Republican voters, like who voted in the primaries, fault for encouraging Donald Trump to do that more and more? Because there was an open Republican primary that Donald Trump did not participate in. Do you think that the Republican voters should have done more on that?
Yeah, yeah. I think in 2016 we were also starstruck about like, oh, this guy's coming up here and saying what we all think. There's no sugarcoating things. We love this.
Yeah.
He's telling us exactly what he thinks. He's not a politician. Hell yeah. We'll take 4 years of this. And then we got 4 years into it, then we were like, oh shit, 4 more years. Let's just do 8 years and then we'll see what happens. And then he lost and now he's back. And a lot of us are like, oh, okay. Well, it's better than Harris.
Yeah, but you're still
Guess
not
we got to
like
take him.
Did you vote in the primaries by chance?
No, I didn't. I didn't do anything with voting this year. I've been a typical response. I've been too busy, but I really was. There was a lot of stuff I was doing.
I get it. I get it. We both have very busy lives, and I busted my rear despite the fact I was also stupid busy because I wanted everybody to vote. I was thinking it was very important. I still do think it's important.
It is. It is very important.
So, but on the vice presidential debate, because this goes into my bigger just general political thesis that I've developed over the last few years, because I'm not as quick to blame the average voter for everything.
Yeah.
Because even the fucking smart of us is very subject to propaganda or political malpractice of any kind.
Sure.
It is Donald Trump's entire comeuppance, his rise in popularity is a direct result of apathy from both political parties, apathy from the Democrats for not pushing things harder, apathy for them not like basically just being corporate interests, and apathy of the Republicans for doing the same thing. And that is what made him so popular in 2016, right? Because he was the one out there saying that these parties have sucked, they failed you, and you know what, I'm going to go fix it.
Mm-hmm.
But his quick, I want to say, have you heard the term sane washing?
Sane washing. Explain it to me.
It's a newer term where they're basically like, okay, whatever stupid, insane bullshit Donald Trump says, let's try to make that make sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially like he's going to take over Greenland and Denmark's going to pay us to do it or some shit like that. He didn't say the Denmark part exactly, but something like, or like he'll go.
We're gonna build a wall and Mexico's
Mexico's
gonna
going to pay
pay
for it,
for
right?
it. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
insanity. Like it's ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. Mexico's not going to pay for a freaking wall. But then you'll have entire political agencies, groups, and news organizations will go out and start theorizing how that could technically be done. Like, oh, how can this happen actually? It's called sane washing. He says something insane and like they make sense of it. That has been a fault of rich media donors like the Koch brothers, Murdoch, and like the different Fox News contributors who are like, oh, let's tie our hitch to him, and those are the people that Donald Trump put in his cabinet, like our future Secretary of Education, who was McMahon. You know who she is? Vance McMahon's wife from WWE fame.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
she was one of the rich fellers that hitched her ride to Trump very early and has been rewarded for that politically. Elon Musk does it to an extent too, but like, oh, I totally lost my train of thought. They all will make sense of Donald Trump's insanity and say like, yes, this will work 100%. Just trust us, trust him because he's the dear leader. Even when he completely contradicts himself, oftentimes in the same speech or within a year. Like in 2016, he was against H-1B visas. Now he's fully support of H-1B visas, and there's no contradiction to it.
Because Americans aren't smart enough to learn technology, right?
Basically, Lord, yeah, exactly. From the Elon Musk point of view, but the Republican Party, and we've spoke on this earlier, is directly at fault for allowing him to come up because it's very easy to see the problems. The vice presidential debate, they both agreed that there were problems we need to address.
Yeah,
They just disagreed on how like to fix those issues. And
sure.
when you look at the Democratic Party, they have proposed some solutions that at least the Republicans should have agreed with on paper, but we've lost the plot so goddamn much that it doesn't matter. And I fully blame the Republicans for that. Like the Democrats were incompetent, right? And I'll use this metaphor again now, even though I'm going to pat myself on the back for it earlier. The Democratic Party's failure has been being incompetent on certain things, whereas the Republican failure has been malicious. If we compare this to say a real world event like the Uvalde shooting, the police can be criticized for their response. The police failed to do their job, and by golly, 100 cops been able to go in there to kill one active shooter is a failure of that system. But at the same time, it was the active shooter that killed those kids. It was his fault those kids died at the end of the day. And that's how I view the political parties right now. Not to say that Republicans are going to go cause an active shooting and kill people, but you get the idea, right?
Yeah.
So, like I know, and I really do appreciate, and one of the reasons I like talking to you, I wanted to pick your head on the whole abortion issue because this is the point where I'm like, I want to get him to come talk.
Oh, here we go, huh?
Hey, you have a very good nuanced opinion on it, and I think that is the opinion most Americans have.
Yeah,
But it doesn't affect us directly politically, so we don't care enough to do anything about it until it's
sure.
too late. So go ahead real quick. Give everybody your overall opinion on abortion. Us two men.
Yeah. Being that I am a man, I have no right, absolutely no right whatsoever to tell a woman what to do with her body, right? Because I am never going to get pregnant. I have no ability to get pregnant. I have no ability to carry a child. Do I think it's right to get an abortion morally? Morally, no. I don't think it's right. I understand why they happen.
Mm-hmm.
I do. You are a 16-year-old girl. You make a mistake, you get pregnant. You are not, there's probably plenty of 16-year-olds that are more than mature enough to raise a child, but say for this instance, you're 16, you're still in high school, you got your whole future ahead of you. I understand why you'd want to get an abortion. You're not ready for that type of responsibility yet. I would never in a million years ask my wife to get an abortion. But I couldn't tell her not to, if that's what she wanted.
God, you little
You know.
feminist, you! I swear.
But I don't find it to be the correct course of action because I am a Christian. I believe in God. I believe that all life is precious. But at the same time, I can't tell you what to do. You know, um, whether it be for health reasons, for personal reasons, for financial reasons, whatever. Um, I don't think it's right to make it illegal to get an abortion. We talked about this the other day, and what you're saying about states society, and it makes sense. So I don't think it's right for a state to tell you whether you can or can't. Um, you did change my mind on that one, so congratulations on
Hey,
that.
we're blue pilling
Um,
everybody.
you got me on that one. Um, at the end of the day, I don't think it's right. But again, I can't tell you what to do. Uh, that's very, I would say that's the average American view, average American male view. I'm not a woman, not my body, not my choice.
Yeah.
Um, at the end of the day, if you want to make that decision at the end of the day, that's your decision. If you regret it, you regret it. That's the decision you made. You have to live with it. I'm not going to shame you for it. Nobody should, but you have to live with the decisions that you make if you make.
Right. And I
That's
think,
just my view.
and that is, yeah, most people think that, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
It should reflect in our politicians what most people think about that. But again, that's not what the narrative is. Um,
No.
you listen to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is saying is that Democrats are killing babies after they've been born. Um, you haven't heard any of these, right? Have you?
Yeah, it's not true.
It's not true. No.
I have heard those points, yeah, but yeah, do you remember whenever abortion was first the hot topic, right? Way back in the day.
Gosh.
Uh Whenever Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Yeah.
Where they had this I can't remember if he was a pediatric surgeon or he was had some sort of doctor that had to do with pregnant mothers, right?
Hmm.
And he did a stint in an abortion clinic where he talked about literally pulling limbs out with his forceps. Do you remember that
No,
interview?
I don't remember that interview. I'll have to look
Oh,
this one up
I
after.
I watched an interview with this guy, and he's like, basically, you go in, you inject the saline solution that literally burns the baby to death, right? And you
Horrifying.
go in, you cut the limbs off, and you pull them out
Right.
one by one with these long forceps, basically. And he's like, I've done hundreds of these, and it affects me every single time I do it. And I'm like, brother, if you are to the point where the baby's developing limbs, it takes a lot of force to cut through that baby in the womb. I don't necessarily believe that you did that.
I think so. Again, I am not a medical expert, but if I had to
Neither am
guess,
I. Neither am I.
um, you can actually bite through your fingers as easily as you do a carrot, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
not that hard. But if I had to guess, just based on context for that and what I know previously, he may have done that. I think, but if there are abortions that are being performed at that late of a stage, I think those are the rare percentage we talked about of
It's
like
like
third
third
trimester.
trimester at this
Yeah.
point.
But that part of abortion is generally very rare and
Yeah.
normally only happens due to medical necessity, right?
Yeah. Like a baby passing away in the womb or
Hmm.
a childbirth that will actually like it is 100% determined that it will kill the mother.
Yes, that is when those type of abortions happen. But of course, if you look at the conservative media point of view on that, that is all the Democrats are pushing is killing children the second that they are viable for life, just for pure
Hmm.
evilness. And it's conversations like that that I continuously reassure me to vote for the Democratic Party because I'm like, no, what are like you're straight up lying about this, and I really wish like exactly what you said is how most Americans feel, and even extrapolating that to other other topics of conversation, the economy, taxes, anything like that. I guarantee most Americans would agree on our point of view on things. But when the lies are put out by Donald Trump and others, it creates a dangerous narrative to where, most people aren't going to shame you for having an abortion, but there have been conservatives who have like bombed and firebombed abortion clinics or attacked doctors online or in person, and it's only reaffirmed by the lies put out in the media on certain instances. And I know there are definitely points where the left gets this wrong too, where they put out misinformation and lies, but it's not promoted by the politicians and the parties nearly to the extent that it is by Donald Trump. And that is what I'm hopeful beyond anything to get away from, at least in the next 2 or 4 years. I'm glad you said I changed your mind on it, though. That means I'm doing something right.
Yeah.
Definitely gonna help my ego a little bit.
A lot of these talks have been very educational for me because, like I told you the other day, I'm very neutral on a lot of things. I don't get, emotionally invested in a lot. No, like my wife and my family, absolutely, 100% has all my emotions. I will walk to the end of the earth and jump off if my wife told me to. Now, whenever it comes to politics and, a lot of my everyday interactions with people, I'm very neutral, very flat ground with most of this stuff because the more emotion that you put into things, the more it exhausts you, so it makes life way easier if you just keep a neutral slate about things and step back to observe things.
Yeah.
You know, you see somebody who's really struggling with their political or their emotional or their sexual or their financial identity, and you as an observer, as an outside observer, can understand their plight. You can see what they need to do to fix things or what they need to do to become more of a whole person because you're stepped back. This person that's right in that situation is standing, this close to the wall. They can only see this little bit.
Yeah.
You are standing all the way back here. You can see them and the whole wall.
Yeah.
So it's easier for you to understand the whole situation than it is for them because they're right in the middle of it.
And I think
And I feel
what you described right there is a lot of things I have a problem with on the left and how they interact with regular conservatives, because they do push conservatives to the right more and more.
they do,
Because they are emotionally overreacting and seeing things very close. I understand why they do that, though, is because to them it is very personal. Like if there's one more thing I can change your mind on is to make sure that during the next election you do vote, is because.
Oh yeah, I'll be voting on the next one. Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's see if I can turn you a little bit lefter than
well, depending on the candidates, know, if it's
you got the midterms too. Don't forget about those. Very important.
Yeah, that's
not
true.
Just the president.
That's true.
Is the thing I will have you consider is that, like, the abortion topic is a very emotional issue, and as I told you before, like, regardless of my opinion on it, I would vote for you and your wife to be able to have that right and protection. Like, God forbid something bad happens, is I would want your wife to be protected from that, and not have to
Absolutely.
deal. Yeah. And so to me, voting on that, because ain't nothing Trump done going to affect me that much. But protecting those that I love and care about, that is why I want to continue to vote, because there are instances, and it, like the whole abortion thing, where that will affect people, and I don't want it
Sure.
to. So, if there's anything from this conversation, maybe hopefully that'll be the next thing I change your mind on. We'll work on it, though.
Well, you're 1-0 right now. You're 1-0.
You should see how I am with another one of our coworkers who voted for Trump. I am 3-0 on him, and he's very mad about it. But that is going to be, I think, a good stopping point for us right now. Chase, please say whatever you'd like to do to the internet. Say goodbye, internet.
Oh, goodbye, internet. It's been great talking with you. Mr. Devin, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and, convey some information and learn a couple of things along the way.
Hey, that does mean a lot, but always got to say, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I hate myself so much for having to do that.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. All right, another Fireside Yaps.